Welcome to video number 7. This is a video about making your financial statement. We will also be introducing our financial statement assistant, which comes in 2 versions. Version 1 for fees and maintenance costs, version 2 for research, travel and conference expenses.
Now, your financial statement is one of the 4 main parts of your charity application and is probably the second most important part behind your personal statement. To get more info on the other parts of your application, have a look at the previous 2 sections on making your application and personal statements. Now, your financial statement should have 2 parts. The first part is a table which talks about the current funding you have already secured in the given academic year in question, which might be the current academic year or maybe next academic year. And the purpose of this table is to list all of the other bodies who have either made you awards or you think that might make you awards. The table should look something like this. So as you can see, the bodies that you have already applied for or that you think you're going to apply for are listed in the left-hand column. You've got a date of decision column. You've got the amount that you think that the charity might award you or the body might award you, and then whether you've been successful, unsuccessful, or you're not sure. By the way, this table can include any funders. It doesn't just have to be charities. It can be bursaries that you've secured at your university, or indeed even maybe research council grants as well. The purpose of this table is really to give the charity the very strong impression that they are not the only funder of, say, your maintenance or this conference or research trip or whatever it might be. Charities really don't like being the only funder of something. They like being part of a bigger funding plan, and they like working together with other charitable bodies. Also, if your deficit, and we'll explain that when we talk about the statement of expenses and income in a minute, is particularly large, charities are really going to want to think that there are other charities out there that you have asked for money, as well as just them. Okay, so the second part of your financial statement, and the more important part, is your table of expenses and income. This should look something like this. Now, as you can see, the expenses on this table are for fees, for rent, for utility charges, for telephone, food, household miscellaneous, travel, photocopying, etc. More or less any of the kind of costs that you would associate, obviously, with with being a student and with independent maintenance. Income, on the other hand, could come from part-time work, from savings, or of course from other scholarships or other charity awards that you have won. Now, if you're applying for research, travel or conference expenses, your table isn't going to look like that. It's just going to be a budget for the particular trip in question or for the particular piece of equipment in question or whatever it is. So for example, if it's a conference or a research trip, your expenses might be conference registration costs, airline ticket, a subsistence, i.e. food and drink while you're away, hotel bills, etc. Your income might be another charity award, or it might be a conference bursary, or it might just be some money from your savings. Now, for either type of table of income and expenditure, you're going to have a total expenditure and a total income at the bottom. Now, obviously, your total expenditure should be higher than your total income, otherwise you wouldn't actually be in deficit. So the question is, what is your deficit? Well, obviously, just subtract your total income from your total expenses, and then you'll have your shortfall. That might be £3,000, it might be £2,000, whatever really. You then will have to request an amount from that charity. The charity might have some guidance on the maximum award that it might permit you, but obviously, if your shortfall is larger than the maximum award that a charity grants, for example, if you have a £3,000 shortfall and the maximum grant the charity makes is £1,000, the charity is going to want to know that you've listed other charities that you're applying for so you can plug the rest of the gap. That's why that other table is really important as well. One other general thing about the table of expenditure and income: the amounts that you put on have got to be reasonable, naturally. A charity is going to want to know, if you're applying for, say, maintenance money, that the amount that you're spending on rent, that the amount you're spending on food isn't excessive. Generally speaking, somebody living in London with no children could probably be a reasonable monthly expenditure might be up to around £1,200. Although of course there will be a lot of other complicated reasons why your amounts might be lower than that or might be higher than that or whatever. Similarly, with research, travel and conference expenses, obviously use the cheapest airline, use stay in cheap accommodation, and if you're say buying equipment, show that that is the best value equipment on the market. So give an impression that your expenses are reasonable in both instances.
Now, let's have a look at financial statements in more detail by going to our financial statement assistant.
We're now going to have a look at Financial Statement Assistant, another useful tool which helps you write an organised financial statement. Now, Financial Statement Assistant can be found at the bottom of the Financial Statement section right here. Before you use it though, it's probably a good idea just to read the guidance here with financial statements and also to have a look at our model financial statement, which you can see right here. Now this takes you through what a financial statement should look like. Now in this case, this student is applying for fees and maintenance funding, not research, travel and conference expenses, and we'll describe in a minute the difference between those two. But as you can see, there are a variety of areas that are down as expenses and a variety of areas that are down as income. Now, the financial statement assistant itself is based upon these amounts. So as you can see, you're being invited here to input amounts for course fees, rent, utility charges, etc. But the first thing I should really mention with the Financial Statement Assistant is it comes in two flavours. The first version is for students who are, like the statement that we just brought up there, applying for fees and maintenance. That's version 1, that's the one we're on now. And the second one is for students who are applying for research and conference applications. Now the difference between these two is that the fees and maintenance application goes into all of the aspects about independent study and maintenance. That's course fees, rent, utility charges, telephone, etc., right down to all of those things. Whereas for a conference or a research travel, the expenses are going to be things like conference registration, travel costs, accommodation, and the income will obviously come from other grants and that sort of thing. So it's a different kind of setup. So obviously pick the one that applies to you. Now, you can get an expanded idea of what each of these fields relates to by just hovering over the question mark, and that'll give you a bit more expanded information. Now, so you can write down amounts for these things. So let's say course fees of £4,000, rent of £6,500. These are yearly amounts, by the way, of course. Maybe utility charges of £600, telephone £400, food maybe £1,800, clothing £300, and we'll just continue to fill these in with reasonable amounts. Obviously, if you're budgeting for this in advance, maybe if you're a prospective student and you don't really, maybe just going into a course and you don't necessarily know exactly how much these things will cost, you can get guidance from your university, or you can just use the guidance here in this statement, which are probably reasonable amounts for a single person with no children. So I've inputted the expenses here and we've come up with a figure £15,700 in total. That's a pretty reasonable kind of amount, the amount that you would probably expect. Probably a little on the low side, if anything. So then we've got income. Now that can come from a variety of sources. So let's assume part-time work, £2,900. Maybe grants, these could be from other charities, for example, £3,000. Maybe let's put £1,000 in for loans. And then the savings that have been allocated for this year. So there we've got in our income, and Personal Statement Assistant has rather conveniently added up these things here, our total income and our total expenditure, and it's give us then a deficit. You should then also input an entry as to how much you are requesting from a charity. Now the charity will have some guidance on the maximum amount of its award. It might be that you can cover all of your deficit just in one grant, but that's probably not going to be the case. So let's write down 2,000 here for this hypothetical example. You can also download your financial statement that you just put in very conveniently, and the text comes up here in Notepad. You'll probably want to copy and paste that into Word or Excel to make it look neater than that, but at least it enables you to download it, which is very useful. You can do the same thing, of course, with research, travel and conference expenses, and it does exactly the same thing and enables you to download it in exactly the same way. So that's Financial Statements Assistant, just a very, very useful way, like the Personal Statement Assistant, of making sure that you have an organised financial statement that doesn't miss anything out.
Thanks for listening. Please click on the Read More About It link at the bottom of the page for further information.